Every year, hazardous materials lead to thousands of injuries and even deaths among workers who handle them. If there is a spill or exposure involving a hazmat at your facility, you could suffer a serious injury or experience long-term health effects. One of the most important things you can do is become familiar with hazmat container labels. These offer you the information you need to efficiently recognize what material you're working with and the hazards that are associated with it. And if you are transporting or disposing of hazardous materials, it is particularly vital for you to know how to read and understand DOT hazard class and hazardous waste labels. In this program, we'll discuss the type of information you can find on DOT hazard class labels and hazardous waste labels, and how you can use it to keep yourself safe. One of the best ways to get information about a hazardous material is through its container label. In fact, labeling containers is so important that the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, the Department of Transportation, DOT, and the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, all have their own labeling requirements for the materials that they regulate. And these systems have all evolved over time. For instance, in 2012, OSHA integrated the globally harmonized system for the classification and labeling of chemicals, GHS, into the Hazard Communication Standard. And in 2024, OSHA established a final rule for the HazCom standard that addressed areas of confusion and gave workers the right to understand the sources of hazmat information, like labels that they can access. According to the HazCom standard, GHS labels must be used on manufacturers' and distributors' chemical containers, as well as on any containers that are used to transport hazmats. OSHA also requires that warning labels appear on all in-house chemical storage containers. So even if you don't work with original containers of hazardous chemicals, you still have access to important information. Companies must also attach warning labels to any other types of containers, such as mixing vats or secondary containers like buckets or spray bottles that hazardous substances are transferred into. At a minimum, these labels must include the name of the hazardous material, associated hazard warnings, and the name, address, and telephone number of the manufacturer, importer, or distributor of the material. While OSHA is concerned about all types of hazardous materials, the focus of the Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, is on hazardous waste. Any containers of hazmats that are being disposed of must have labels that identify each of the individual materials in the containers, no matter how thoroughly they are blended together. EPA hazardous waste labels must also include the originating company's name, address, and telephone number. The third government agency that has hazmat labeling requirements is the Department of Transportation, which covers materials that are being transported. So the DOT's labeling requirements apply to the containers of hazardous materials that are being moved from place to place, as well as the conveyances that move them. This can include trucks, planes, ships, even pipelines. While the labeling requirements of these three government agencies have some significant differences, they all have some things in common as well. First, all of the agencies require that labels be firmly attached to their containers. However, the term container is defined fairly broadly by each group and can include bottles, boxes, drums, barrels, cylinders, process vats, and tanks. Second, all of the agencies require that hazardous materials labels be displayed prominently so that they are easily noticed by anyone working with the container. The third thing that these agencies agree on is that the information on all labels must be legible. which is especially important if the label contains handwritten information or the container is in a facility where the label could be smeared or otherwise damaged. The systems that are used most often on hazmats include the Globally Harmonized System (GHS), Department of Transportation (DOT) hazard class labels, Hazardous Materials Identification System (HMIS) labels, National Fire Prevention Association (NFPA) labels, and Environmental Protection Agency (EPA) hazardous waste labels. When hazardous materials need to be moved from point A to point B, they require labels that allow the people transporting and receiving them to understand their potential hazards. That's why the Department of Transportation, DOT, governs labels and placards used on materials that are being moved from one location to another. They are diamond-shaped, and you will see them on all sorts of containers, as well as on the sides of trucks, trains, and other conveyances that are used to transport hazmats. To ensure their visibility, DOT labels have strict design requirements. The labels on chemical containers themselves must never be smaller than 3.9 inches, 100 millimeters on each side, so that you can identify the labels from as far as 10 to 15 feet away. The placards that are used on trucks and other vehicles must be significantly larger, since they are most often viewed while they are in motion and from a distance. So the DOT requires that placards measure at least 9.84 inches, 250 millimeters on each side. Many DOT labels and placards display symbols in the top half of their diamonds. In many cases, these pictograms are similar to those that were created for the UN's Globally Harmonized System of Classification and Labeling of Chemicals to designate various hazard classes. In the past, OSHA worried that the combination of the DOT and GHS pictograms would be confusing. But they eventually decided that since all of the labels provide valuable hazard information, this was really not a problem, even if some of the information is redundant. When you look below the pictogram on a DOT label, you'll find the material's hazard class number. For quick identification, the DOT has grouped hazardous materials into 9 classes, each representing a specific type of hazard. These classes are numbered 1 to 9. Class 1 is for explosives. This category contains anything that can detonate, from shock-sensitive materials to substances that will only explode under specific conditions, such as extreme heat. Class 2 consists of hazardous gases, whether they are flammable, non-flammable, toxic, or inert. Class 3 is comprised of flammable and combustible liquids, specifically those with flash points below 141 degrees Fahrenheit. The flash point of a substance is the lowest temperature at which it can readily catch fire. The lower its flash point, the more flammable the material. The DOT's 4th hazard class is made up of flammable solids. These have ignition characteristics similar to flammable liquids in Class 3, but also include spontaneously combustible and water-reactive materials. Class 5 covers oxidizers and organic peroxides. Both of these types of materials can enrich the oxygen content of other substances, making normally safe materials flammable. Poisonous substances belong to hazard class 6. The DOT defines poisonous very broadly and includes toxic and infectious materials in this class. Hazard class 7 encompasses radioactive materials. If a substance emits alpha, beta, or gamma radiation, it belongs in this category. Class 8 contains corrosives, defined by the DOT as any substance with a pH of 2.0 or less, or a pH of 12.5 or more. which includes chemicals such as sulfuric acid, nitric acid, and sodium hydroxide. Some materials do not clearly fit into any of these 8 classes. That's what Class 9, Miscellaneous Hazardous Materials, is for. Some examples of Class 9 hazards include dry ice, lithium batteries, and asbestos. An essential element of the DOT hazmat labeling system is its color coding scheme. If a label is too far away for its text to be read, color coding still lets emergency responders know which DOT hazard class the material belongs to. The colors you can find on DOT labels include red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and white. Red represents flammables and combustibles, while orange stands for explosives and yellow indicates oxidizers and oxygen. A green label represents non-flammable gases. Blue indicates a substance is water reactive, and white means a substance is poisonous or a biohazard. Some of these colors can also be combined to depict other, more specific hazards. For instance, a half-white, half-red placard means a material is flammable when it's exposed to air. Similarly, red and white stripes indicate that a material is a flammable solid. A half-red, half-yellow placard represents a flammable organic peroxide, and white and yellow indicate that a substance is radioactive. 2 other types of materials use labels that are a combination of black and white. A half-white, half-black placard means a substance is corrosive, and black and white stripes represent various non-classified dangerous goods. While the DOT labeling system is used primarily in North America, some DOT labels do have a feature that is recognized worldwide: United Nations UN identification numbers. Under this international identification system, every substance is assigned a unique 4-digit number. For example, the UN number for gasoline is 1203. Because they are specific to the material, in a hazmat incident, UN numbers can be a crucial source of information for first responders and help hazmat crews to bring events quickly under control. Under federal law, Environmental Protection Agency (EPA) approved hazardous waste labels must be attached to all containers of discarded chemicals that can be harmful to human health or the environment. To do this, an EPA waste identification number must be assigned to each discarded substance. These 12 character numbers are provided by the EPA based on the types of materials in the container, the facility it is coming from, and the date on which it is being shipped. This identifier must then be entered on the label, along with the waste's DOT proper shipping name and its UN number if it has one. To prevent confusion, all other labels must be removed from the container before a hazardous waste label is attached. And if a container holds a mixture of 2 or more discarded chemicals, a workplace accumulation label must also be attached. These accumulation labels must list the individual materials that make up the waste. They must also include the accumulation start date and waste accumulation area. If a container is leaking and has to be placed into an overpack drum, a hazardous waste label must be placed on that drum as well. Some states use their own hazardous waste labels instead of the federal labels, so you may need to check with your state's Department of Environmental Resources to determine if you should use a state label. And remember, you should never put any hazmat waste label on a container that does not hold waste. On the other hand, If you find a chemical container that is unlabeled, you must treat it as if it contains hazardous materials or waste until it is determined otherwise. This means that everyone should stay away from the container, and you should inform your supervisor immediately. When it comes to working with hazardous materials, the more informed you are, the safer you can be. So it's important to know how to read hazmat container labels and how it can help you prevent and respond to exposure incidents. Let's review. When you're transporting or disposing of hazmats, you should know how to read and understand the DOT and EPA labeling systems. The most common labeling system for materials that are being transported is the Department of Transportation's DOT Hazard Class system. DOT Hazard Class labels use colors, text, and pictograms to provide hazmat information. DOT Hazard Class placards are affixed to the sides of trucks, trains, and other conveyances that are used to transport hazardous materials. An EPA waste identification number must be assigned to every discarded hazardous substance. EPA-approved hazardous waste labels must be attached to all containers of discarded chemicals that could be harmful to human health or the environment. Now that you know how to use DOT Hazard Class and EPA hazardous waste labels to understand materials and their hazards when they are being transported or disposed of, you can work to keep yourself, your coworkers, and your facility safe every day.